Hey, Step Squad, it's Tickets Please once again with a look at the top 25 films I've seen in 2024. Not to be confused with the films I've seen of 2024, which I've done already. This would take a look at all the 83 of the films that I saw this year and drops the top 25 of them for you, along with a few honorable mentions. Let's get to it. At number 25, don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the lakes and rivers that you're used to. Ugetsu is a cautionary tale of trying to risk your life to seek fame and fortune during wartime. Genjuro, his brother in law Tobai, and their wives decide to sell pottery to people on the other side of the battle. Once there, he gets caught up with the interests of Lady Wakasa, while Tobai seeks nothing more than to be a samurai. Meanwhile, the women in their lives are vulnerable as the men seek their fortune. Although there is a sour taste left from the women having to suffer for the men to learn something, solid acting and direction from Kenzie Mizoguchi keep the story moving. And the cinematography from Kazuo Miyagawa is outstanding and it manages to be timeless and classic at the same time, giving the film an ethereal quality. Over at number 24, a program that tries to keep families together gets its due. I've already covered the film Daughters twice. Four families are chosen to be part of a program where the imprisoned fathers have to complete a program on how to be a good father before they can take part in a daddy-daughter dance with their children, some of whom haven't seen them in years. There are some powerful moments from the fathers and the families left behind as they explain the cost of being separated. Although the film could have been a little bit clearer on explaining who Angela Patton was, it does earn its emotions honestly, and hopefully the program will continue to grow and expand. Meanwhile, number 23 takes us to infinity and beyond. Toy Story is a story where toys can talk to each other while humans are away. The peaceful life that head toy Cowboy Woody was having is shattered when its newest toy, Buzz Lightyear, comes in. Although it does skew a bit towards being nightmare fuel at times, the lessons of resolving jealousy and not presuming who others are based on their looks still resonate 30 years later. The real reason this story holds up is due to the story around it being solid. Number 22 takes a moment of history and reveals the truth and chaos behind it. Last Days in Vietnam focuses on the last weeks of the Vietnam War and the decisions made by those high up to evacuate. The documentary plays out as a thriller, as those on the ground don't want to leave behind those they worked with or got married to. Although, yes, there are talking heads that are standard for this sort of film, it does do a good job of covering the story of Operation Frequent Wind, as they had to race the clock and the approaching North Vietnamese army in order to get out as many troops and allies as they could. Number 21, A Story of Perfection and Living Up to a Legacy. Jiro Dreams of Sushi is a documentary about the top sushi chef in Japan and how he's able to turn a 10-seat restaurant into a Michelin-ranked restaurant, dropping 3 stars out of 3. It focuses on the relentless drive and search for perfection from an 85-year-old man who identifies himself by his job, like they do in Asian countries. It also doesn't shy from calling out Jiro for being a tough demanding father who only takes off on national holidays. The sushi does look amazing, and this is from somebody who doesn't like the food. Be sure not to watch this one on an empty stomach. For number 20, it may be a play shot on film, but it's a well done one. A Raisin in the Sun, the 1961 film, stars Sidney Poitier, Ruby Dee, and Claudia McNeil as a family that falls into a small fortune after the family patriarch dies, and they debate what to do with it. Perhaps they could buy a house, start a business, or help the younger sister become a doctor. The characters are multifaceted as they face the ups and downs of their life. Although it never really convincingly expands from the stage, Thanks to good acting and directing, this film keeps flowing from start to finish. Just beware of welcoming committees from neighborhoods you plan to move into. At number 19, they don't make movies like this anymore. Top Secret is a spoof of spy films, and Elvis Pictures as a popular singer heads to East Germany for a music festival and falls for a woman whose father is being held captive by the German army to build a naval mine. You get some enthusiastic song and dance numbers involving skeet shooting while surfing and cutting rugs from Val Kilmer, who shows some panache. You got a nice mix of visual and verbal gags that hit more often than not, and throw in a solid supporting cast: Michael Gow, Omar Sharif, Peter Cushing. Maybe it's not a level of Airplane or Naked Gun, but Top Secret does come pretty close. Meanwhile, number 18 argues for the continuing effort of Disney to have two studios for animation. Frozen is a story of two royal sisters being pulled apart because the older sister can turn things cold with just a touch, and the younger one is just desperate for human contact. An impromptu engagement from the latter leads to the older one isolating herself in an ice palace, while permanent winter strikes the kingdom. Although the film struggles to turn the younger sister into a Disney princess, even if they play with the love at first sight trope, the film resonates because it's all about the sisters' love for each other and their attempts at reconciling. And throw in the story twists and depth of the characters, and it holds up better than Snow White or Pinocchio. Yes, I just went there. Over at number 17, just because it's featured in riff tracks doesn't make it a bad film. Not at all. Charade is a Hitchcock-esque thriller from Stanley Donen, who is probably better known for musicals like Singing in the Rain and Funny Face. Although it is a stretch to see Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant as romantic foes due to their age difference, they do share some solid chemistry as well as a penchant for some good one-liners. The film is able to balance deftly between a comedy and a thriller thanks to solid direction and a tight script. And there is some able support from James Coburn and Walter Matthau. You may be able to solve part of the mystery before the characters do, but you'll definitely appreciate the twists and turns of the story, even if you can see clips of it show up on Rip Tracks The Game. Meanwhile, number 16 is a successful version of the film that Uncut Gems was trying to be. The Teacher's Lounge is set in a German school where right is wrong is right, and the results don't seem to matter anyway. The efforts of Carla to do the right thing with a student who is accused of theft and find out who is really behind it turns into a Kafka-esque nightmare. It turns into a sweaty thriller where each decision made by Carla goes southward despite the best of intentions. Leone Benesch and the rest of the cast push you deeper into the world. The real question is should this have won Best International Feature over Anatomy of a Fall? Meanwhile, number 15 dives us into the French Turo system, which offers a few changes to what we might be used to. And speaking of Anatomy of a Fall, it's of course right here. It's a drama about a writer accused of killing her husband as she goes through the French system of justice, which is largely accurate to real life. Her relationship goes on trial as well, and it may come to the testimony of their partially blind son. Sandra Holler goes to the ringer as the writer deals with the ups and downs of the trial, as well as struggles with her son, who is being supervised by a court official. Although I do wish they had showed pieces of the relationship's better days, and the final testimony didn't reveal evidence withheld until the very last minute, a great performance from Holler and good turns from the boy and the dog carry this through to the end. Who'd have thunk that rap music sounded good on steel drums? Over at number 14, a travelogue full of interesting people, and I'm not just talking about the ones on screen the whole time. Faces Places is my first film from Grandma Agnes, and if it's any indication what I can look forward to, it won't be my last. A documentary of a road trip through France between director Agnes Varda and photographer JR features a nice interplay between the two co-leads. But they also find fascinating stories from the people they meet along the way. which of course makes the murals they make with him that much more meaningful. Plus, there's callbacks to Jean-Luc Godard, such as how JR never removes his sunglasses, and a sequence involving him wheeling Agnes down a museum floor in a wheelchair, similar to how Godard had three people running that same place in one of his films. You know exactly where you're going, but you enjoy it anyway. For number 13, it's The Power of the Press that meets the middle of a war. 20 Days in Mariupol was the Oscar winner for Best Documentary Feature just last year. It's a story of a team of Ukrainian reporters stuck in the besieged city of Mariupol by Russian soldiers. They risked their lives getting a story out on what was happening in Ukraine and the brutal footage of shell buildings, devastated victims, and decimated hope. All while Russian propagandists argued that what was coming out there was fake news with actors pretending to be heard for TV. It is painful to watch, but then again, it must be painful to watch. Now for something a little bit lighter. Presenting number 12, Wicked, Part 1, is a story of the friendship that forms between Elphaba and Galinda as they star on a path towards their destinies, first at Shiz Academy and later at the powerful land of Oz. The visuals popped on the big screen. Some of the songs appear to be visual and audio spectacles, such as the ethereal Defying Gravity, the snappy popular, the visual majesty of Dancing Through Life, and the memorable What Is This Feeling? Although both Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Yeoh struggle to keep up with the dancers and musicians in this film, thankfully the focus is on those that can do the heavy lifting. John Cho is able to take the Broadway musical and break it free from the stage. Plus, if you love the original musical, you may want to see this one if you haven't already. And based on the box office, I think a lot of you have. Number 11 brings us the highs and lows of emotional cheating. In Brief Encounters, a woman who is bored with her marriage to a nice guy meets a doctor at a train station, and they start to develop a relationship with feelings for each other. Complicating things is that he's married as well, which leads to a dilemma with no easy answers. The lead character, played by Celia Johnson, has a biting commentary that runs in her head that frees the film from its stage origins. Also helping is the assured direction of David Lean. Of course, you normally expect him to do more epic films like Lawrence of Arabia, but here this worked. Johnson's performance is superb as she carries around both the promise of the new relationship with the regrets of her family being affected by this. As a doctor, Trevor Howard is fine, and although I usually avoid British films with repressed relationships, this is a happy exception. Maybe happy isn't the right word for what happens, but it works, I guess. Meanwhile, number 10 features three characters connecting in rural New Jersey. His station agent doesn't have a lot happening on the surface. Finn inherits a train station where he wants to be left alone, but a food vendor with a sick father keeps trying to draw him out of his shell. And an artist with poor driving skills starts to get him to open up. But as each person faces their own challenges, the relationships tend to ebb and flow. The film manages to stay on the right side of quirky thanks to the assured direction of Tom McCarthy. And the characters come to life thanks to the performances of Peter Dinklage, Bobby Cannavale, and Patricia Clarkson. Throw in some solid support from Michelle Williams and John Slattery, and it draws you in like a good book that you just have to reach the ending on. If you're going to commit a crime for love, number 9 warns you not to forget the small details. Elevator to the Gallows has a young man killing the husband of a wealthy, beautiful woman. But he realizes he forgot a climbing rope they used to get there, and he ends up stuck in the elevator just as his girlfriend wanders the streets of Paris in a stormy night. Meanwhile, 2 teens steal his car and encounter an older couple along the way. While the mystery ends up wrapped up a little bit too neatly, director Louis Malle keeps his film and its plot on a tight leash. The jazzy score by Miles Davis punctuates the happenings on the screen, and both Jean Moreau as the object of desire, and Maurice Ronet as the unlucky young man excel in his French noir. While switching up your style, number 8, notes to make sure to accept the consequences. American Fiction features a great turn from Jeffrey Wright as an author and academic who writes books considered too boring by the public, even though the academics enjoy them. But when he decides he has had enough of the urban melodrama books that are bestsellers, he decides to write one of his own as a satire of the genre, and maybe come up with a little bit of spare money to take care of his sick mother. But unexpectedly, it starts taking off as the lines between reality and fiction start to blur. And this is all happening as he has to deal with the death in the family, take care of his mother, and start a new relationship with a lawyer. The film manages to thread a needle between a modern African American dramedy with a savage look at the book publishing and film worlds as they take the satire seriously and feel like it could be a candidate for the Oscars, throwing a solid supporting cast and sharp writing and direction from Cord Jefferson, and it's a type of film that Bamboozled can only dream of being. Number 7 chimes in with the beauty of a short, well-paced thriller noir. The Killing at its heart is a film about a varied group of people committing a heist, the last one for lead Johnny Quay before retiring and getting married. But things take a turn when one of the members decides to tell his spoiled wife and her boyfriend most of the details. Much like Pulp Fiction, The Killing is able to flash back and forward in time convincingly. And there's a hint of the original Thomas Crown affair in there as well. Director Stanley Kubrick shows what he can do with a tightly wound narrative and a sharp, insightful script. That last hour, which features the last twist, is fantastic. Other than the unnecessary dragnet-style narration, this one is nearly perfect. Film number 6 is arguably better in part 1, a rare sight indeed. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse deals with the continuing adventures of Miles Morales, a teen who we all know the origin story to by now. But what happens next for Miles, Gwen, and their families? That's the focus for part 2 as Miles struggles to do his duties as Spider-Man while working on his relationship with his parents and getting into a good college. Meanwhile, Gwen has joined a group that fights anomalies in the multiverse, which includes making sure that canons happen and loose ends are tied up. But it becomes a problem for Miles as his dad is supposed to be promoted to police chief, which would put him in danger. The complexity of the plot is borderline amazing here. They worked out a spot for one character that allowed an astounding amount of world building, which combines Mumbai and Manhattan. And he's only a secondary character here. Throw in some strong voice work and a fast pace, and we can overlook the weakish development of the villain known as Spot. He tries to push he's more in Villain of the Week, but maybe part 3 will fill that part in. Now at number 5 is a monster finds his voice once again. There we go. Godzilla Minus One appears last year as the monster approaches 70 years old. Director Takashi Yamazaki took all the mythology and story of the franchise and whittled it down to its core. The result's a horror movie similar to Halloween or Jaws, where the monster makes the most of its limited time. Instead, more focus is paid on the humans, including its protagonists, a former kamikaze pilot who chickened out while on duty and now is seeking redemption. The film does veer occasionally into melodrama, but his decision to set this in post-World War II Japan proves to be a masterstroke. By making this about average humans, it gives an extra dose of sympathy, as well as setting an extra level of obstacles against a rampaging monster. Because obviously, as part of the agreement, the military in Japan does not exist. Godzilla is a giant instrument of destruction. This film deservedly won for its use of visual effects. It probably deserved more than one nomination win in last year's Oscars. Um, all right, there we go. Over at number 4, the cinematic equivalent of a warm hug. The Holdovers. From the opening credits, which imagines what a focus intro would be like in 1970 or 1971, letting you know you are in for something special. Unless you're Hans and director Alexander Payne, the main 3 characters could have come across as cliches. The cranky teacher, the snarky student, and the lunch lady who is mourning her son's loss in Vietnam. But thanks to his efforts, as well as the casting of Paul Giamatti, Dominic Sessa, and Divine Joy Randolph, who do a good job bringing these characters to life, the results are nothing less than magical. Although there are a couple of convenient plot points. Oh look, one of the rich students actually can get a helicopter, can drive most of the other people away from the school for winter break. Imagine. The film manages to be heartwarming and funny without diving into treacle or insulting our intelligence. This could be a new holiday perennial in the making. Meanwhile, number 3 proves that Oscar can get it right sometimes. Oppenheimer is a story of a scientist responsible for the research possible for creating the first atomic bomb, which leads to the rise and fall of his fortunes as he starts to have second thoughts of the ramifications that nuclear weapons have on the world. The acting is led by Cillian Murphy as the scientist and Robert Downey Jr. as Lewis Strauss, who starts his rise at the same time as Oppenheimer but continues to hold a grudge due to a moment of jest in a previous hearing. Thanks to the masterwork of Christopher Nolan for making his drama feel like a thriller in the Trinity tests, and towards the end as both Strauss and Oppenheimer face hearings at the same time but for 2 very different reasons. Despite the 3-hour runtime, you won't need to check your watch. Although the women aren't given nearly enough to do, and there is not enough time spent on the cost of the Asians killed with a blast or the Navajo having their lives shortened due to the atomic tests, the visuals do a good job of showcasing Robert's thought processes as well as the Trinity test itself. The result is a biopic worth savoring of a complex man with a complicated legacy. And number 2 gives us a lean, mean film noir. Detour is the type of film they should be teaching in screenplay classes for telling a full story in a span of just 70 minutes. The story of a piano player who hitchhiked cross-country from New York to Los Angeles to see his girlfriend, who is interested in becoming a movie star. But he gets tangled up with a bookie and a ruthless hitchhiker along the way. Neil is fine as the lead character, although the real find here is the appropriately named Anne Savage as Vera, who takes the film over in the second half, as well as the life of the piano player. I think this may also be an example of a film with an unreliable narrator. Sue is treated like a saint, while Vera is presented as a vixen of pure evil. Despite a low budget, this film manages to be top of its class thanks to its ruthlessness and efficiency. This is one detour you won't mind taking. Before we hit number 1, it's now time for a few honorable mentions. Barbie is a film that takes an extremely funny look at the story of world of a toy, and what it says about the relations between men and women in their society. Although they attempts to say something big about the way women have to deal with complications in order to thrive in a modern world, does come across as a bit heavy-handed in places. Director Greta Gerwig largely avoids the corporate showing the lesser film would be guilty of, and brings the world of Barbie to glorious life with its production design and needle drops. Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie do a great job of bringing the toys to life, as both deserve Oscar nominations for the performances. Okay, Bread and Roses is a documentary that reveals what happened after then-President Joe Biden pulled the plug on keeping American troops in Afghanistan. The results were not pleasant, as Islamic fundamentalists cracked down on women's rights and freedoms as the country sank into poverty. But the focus of the film are several women whose protest of work, bread, and education is largely ignored, if not dealt with scorn, by the ruling army. But its cinema verite approach does give the film some immediacy as they continue to fight the good fight and find an unexpected ally here and there along the way. Say Lights is another example of Charlie Chaplin bringing the hilarious with the emotional as he falls for a blind flower girl and befriends a despondent alcoholic rich man. Although the film lacks the consistency of his best works, there's still a lot to appreciate here, from the hilarious choreography of a boxing match, which I'm going to presume was done without any stuntmen, to the smaller pleasures of having a boss eat a sandwich with soap instead of cheese. City Lights highs are worth savoring even as the film does drift into melodrama at times. Immaculate is a tight horror film starring Sydney Sweeney as a young novitiate who ended up in an Italian convent caring for elderly nuns in the last years of life. And all hell breaks loose when she becomes pregnant after completing her vows and starting to work there. Director Michael Mohan is able to deliver on the creepy atmosphere while being able to ratchet up the tension when needed and not skimp on the gore when necessary. Meanwhile, Sweeney delivers a good performance as a woman who is unnerved by what is going on, but is willing to make smart choices to try to escape. Although it was a bit weird to see her character not learn any Italian. I mean, you plan on living there for a while, right? You would think you'd be learning this stuff. The film does nail in the ending, and I'll never think of Ave Maria in the same way ever again. Inside Out has quite the pip of a premise. Imagine the emotions of a person are personified and living and working together in a person's brain. A preteen girl named Riley moves cross-country from Minnesota to San Francisco and finds her life rougher than expected, which allows joy, sadness, disgust, anger, and fear to work overtime as she adjusts. Although the message of letting herself feel other emotions is a good one, it is a bit weak compared to Pixar's best. Still a strong voice cast. I mean, Louis Black as Rage, that is genius. And solid animation do carry the way here. The Last Repair Shop is a short that focuses on a few people who repairs instruments in a small shop in Los Angeles for the school kids who might not have an instrument to play otherwise. Although there isn't enough time to connect the stories of a gay man and an immigrant to the struggles of the kids who need the instruments, Repair Shop does have a lovely coda involving the 4 schools who use the service. It is definitely a touching finale. The Look of Silence is a documentary about an optometrist who searches for answers involving his brother's murder in the 1965 Indonesian purge of people suspected to be communists. Although the task is made harder by the fact that those responsible are now leading the country, he persists in finding answers and learns things about what happened from several participants' witnesses. Although director Joshua Oppenheimer makes the footage of the worst of the atrocities on a TV screen for the protagonist to watch, which reduces the impact, the nature of the narrative does make for a more personal story. The film is at its best when he asks questions the others struggle to answer while balancing the safety of himself and others from the ruling regime. Nimona's Riot Girl. The motion picture is a night in the future who is framed for murder reluctantly gets the help of a shape-shifting monster who has her own reasons for being skeptical of the leaders in charge. Although it is totally all over the map, there's a strong rebellious beating heart at its core. The messiness in this film is not a glitch, but a feature that proves better than the 2 neat mainstream animated films we've been getting for the last 5-10 years. And yes, there is a same-sex relationship at its core that is subtle but charming all the same, and can't be polished out post-release in countries it might offend. Take that, Disney. Prescription Murder is a pilot for what would be known as Columbo. It features a little bit of early season weirdness as he wears a suit and tie. The trench coat is actually nice and neat. And at one point he yells at a possible suspect. But the mystery at its core is pretty good, and there is a top-tier villain for him in the smug psychiatrist Dr. Fleming, played by Gene Barry. There is a good give and take between the two of them, as the killer tries to move 3-4 steps ahead, and tries again throwing out the case. Meanwhile, Columbo keeps trying to find out what's really going on and is able to catch little things here and there that ultimately gets him to solve things at the end. The engrossing story makes up for a somewhat slow pace. But just one more thing. For a top tier Columbo, I'd recommend Publish or Perish and Double Negative. And those are your honorable mentions. Which brings me straight to number one. Last year, I went with a grim but fascinating Russian anti-war movie, Come and See, ahead of some more uplifting options. This year, I chose a film to remind us of the good that people can do. The Great Dictator is a poetical satire that effortlessly blends laughs with insights as Chaplin plays two roles here. The first one is a dictator that is reminiscent of Adolf Hitler as he plans world domination. But in order to get the funding for it, he'll have to ease up on the persecution of the Jewish people living in Tomania. The second row is that of a kindly barber who looks like the dictator, and he's recovering from injuries suffered in rescuing a soldier during World War I. Its timeless message of kindness conquering hatred resonates today more than ever, and that final speech left a lump in my throat. That concludes my top 25 films I've seen in 2024. What was your top film that you saw last year? Leave a comment in the section below. Be sure to like the video and spread the word. This is Tickets Please Review, and the booth is now closed.